Forums are what's going to be fun.
Do they have?
Turn your cell phones off. Don't want none of those beepers.
There's a few.
It's good to be gone.
Call this meeting to order of the Macon Board of Aldermen for July 1st, 2013. Welcome all of you all here with us, board members. We'll get through our agenda here. The first item is the approval of the minutes for our June 3rd, 2013. That came in your package.
Make a motion to be approved.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Persons to be heard, public session, keep it brief, please. John Lathrop, please honor for Pauline Avenue.
John Lathrop from 270 Pauline Avenue. In regard to having the property on Pauline Avenue changed from R2 to R1, wanted to say that first of all that on Pauline Avenue there are 32 property owners. Before the last town meeting that we went to, 16 property owners had returned their signed petitions back in time to be considered, which was making it 50% of the homeowners. An additional 7 more have returned their petitions back to us. And one has given their support over the phone, saying that they would sign the petition and send it to us. So we presently have received signed letters from homeowners on Pauline Avenue equaling 75% if we count the phone call, which they said they would send it to us. The paperwork has been done by Richard Brady, which was unable to come to the meeting tonight, so the information that I'm getting was from him. But he also gave me the letters here. We have all the letters here if anyone wants to see them.
Hold it just a second here, John. How is this fitting on our agenda tonight, John?
The only thing before the board tonight to handle in relation to this matter is to schedule a public hearing for next month.
So it's not necessary?
It's not necessary, no, sir.
Oh, okay.
And really, the board, I mean, out of the context, you gotta have a hearing, of course, before you can make that change. And you can't have this particular hearing, and we'll get into some more detail about that, but until all of those owners who did not apply on their own behalf for the zoning change have been given actual service, actual notice of that hearing. But it's okay, I mean, it's okay for you to gather information.
At any time, of course, but still, today,
Fine.
yes.
Okay, we're just trying to.
Sure you are. You just don't want it to slip by you. You don't want it to slip by you.
That's right.
Okay. We'll,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, thank you.
Dan Williams, you gonna thank us for cleaning up your street? No.
I had a relative one time, and the guy just never had no money. And he could never buy nothing for his family. The guy was always broke. Well, the problem was, every week he was sending money to the TV preachers, Jim and Tammy and Jerry Faldwell, a bunch of them. And it seemed like the town's got the same problem. I've been up here begging since April last year to get the block cleaned up, all the wood around the block. Y'all got a chipper, you got guys, I don't know what they do all day long. After a year, they can't do their job, the town can't do their job. In the meantime, you sit up here and give money away to people. Y'all gave the library $100,000 just to leave town and move out to the sticks. I wish y'all take the money instead of giving it away and do something that you're supposed to do, like maybe keep the town clean. I've been trying for 5 years to get a big pothole filled in on Dogwood Drive. Can't do it. I don't know why. I've been trying for a year to get all the wood picked up around the block. Can't get it done. Nobody wants to do it. Everybody's too busy, I guess. Why don't you take that money that you give away and maybe hire somebody to do the job you're supposed to do? If the town people can't do it, if y'all got a chipper, you got guys on the payroll that seem like they're not interested in doing their job, why don't you hire somebody to do the job? You know, it seems like you got plenty of money to give away.
Dan, this board will set the priorities on how they spend the taxpayers' money. You can either vote for a new board or run yourself and try to get on yourself. That's enough about that.
But I'll just keep begging, maybe you get the job done one day. I'll just come every month and keep begging you.
Thank you.
It's only been a year
We've gone
now.
by your street, and your street looks much, much better. It's been cleaned very well.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll get on to the new business. Our first order is to recognize Russell Bowen for the years of service with the town of Macon on the ABC Board of Commissioners. My pleasure. Russell, Mr. Bowen, you got suit tie on, come on up here. Hat, come on up here, you're the boss. So you're a charter member?
Charter member.
1990, in appreciation for years of dedicated service to the ABC Board in the town of Franklin from 1994 to 2013 by Mayor Collins and the Board of Aldermen. Now, I understand you're going to run a little road race down in Atlanta in a few days.
On the Peachtree Road race.
So you has not been a good patron of this place, obviously, but that's okay. Man's got to have his priorities. But here you go, Russell.
Can I say a word or two when I get done?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Now, you got enough photos? Yep. Okay. The floor is yours, Russell.
Okay, well, I would like to thank the town board for appointing me, as Joe had said, as the mayor said, as one of the original charter members of the town of Franklin ABC board. That was back in 1994 when it wasn't popular to be on the ABC board. But I was appointed originally with Chairman Pat Patillo and Bob Moore, the late Bob Moore. And I've served for 19 years. You might wonder how'd you get 19? Well, my first term was a one-year term. We have staggered terms, believe it or not. We have staggered
Bad word to
terms.
use.
We have staggered terms, and so I had a one-year term and then 6 three-year terms. So I think that's long enough, as the mayor had indicated with his service, 19 years. I think it's a good time for someone else to take over. But I recall fondly when Chairman Pat and Bob Moore and I were appointed, one of our first jobs, we met at my old law office across from the courthouse, and we had to find a manager for the ABC store. And we interviewed several people. And I'm sorry that Clarence Mason, former Commissioner Clarence Mason and Liv Mason are not still alive to see how well their son Todd Mason has done in managing the town of Franklin ABC store. You can't, if you go anywhere else in the state of in North Carolina, you won't find a better managed and better looking ABC store than what we have here in Franklin. And I'm proud of our first hire, and our second hire was our assistant manager, Willeen Connor. And we have 2 fine staff people. And I'm thankful to have, one of the rewarding factors, I'm almost done, was to be able to serve with Pat and Bob Moore and now member Wayne Swain. That's been what's been so rewarding, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me say this. I just want to thank him for the 19 years he spent. He's done a tremendous job. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Pat.
As long as he's got here tonight. Hey, Russell. Uh-oh. Got a problem here. That'll be a short meeting.
Can't see.
Yeah. That's right. Okay. Yeah, see if we can get it there. All right. Presentation of the town Franklin Comprehensive Water Model and Master Plan, Brian Tripp and Derek Roy.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. I'm Brian Tripp with WK Dixon. I appreciate you having me here this evening to talk about your comprehensive water model master plan. I think as you're aware, we've been working with town and town staff on the water model master plan, as well as the, your public works or water committee as well. And so I'm going to try and give you some of the highlights of what's been done over the past, basically about a 6 to 9 month period here. A little bit of background. We asked us to complete a water model going through a demand period or a period of 2035. And we divided the master plan into 4 separate components. We did a project planning area, a water master plan, a 20-year capital improvement plan for your water system, as well as what's called a water asset management plan. And I'll touch on most of these tonight, but I'm going to try and keep it brief and short too. So the report that we're getting staff, there's a copy of it. I've got copies for Warren and Jay, and we'll give you guys digital copies, and we'd be happy to produce as many more copies as you all need. I think in front of you this evening, you've got a hard copy of the slides, as well as the executive summary of the report itself, so not the full body of the report, but then again, if you'd like it, we'd be happy to get you a copy. The full report consists of that executive summary, an introduction section, some information about your geographic information systems and mapping, discussion of the project planning area, discussion of the water master plan, discussion of what sort of opportunities there are for funding out there, and then the capital improvement plan and what's called the water asset management plan. So let's get into the project planning area. I'm going to, again, hit some of the highlights here. As you'll see, the population of Franklin increased from the year 2000 to 2010 by a little over 9%, from 3,490 to about 3,845. In 2010, you had about 2,814 water customers. And information on your households from the U.S. Census Bureau says that there's an average of about 2.21 people or persons per house or residence. So therefore, based on the number of users at 2,814 times that 2.21, that says you're serving about 6,219 people. This is a little bit of a projection on how you can see how the graph goes with the population increasing. Now, we've done the graph out to about 2055. There's a table on the next slide, but you can see from present day at that slightly under 4,000 population, it's going to go to close to 6,500. And then the water customer projections goes from slightly under 2,000 to way over 3,000. So here's a little bit about the population projections. Again, you've got a population about 3,845 in 2010. That equated to 2,814 customers, residential customers that is, plus another 705 commercial customers. And you can see over that planning period, so 2010 to 2030, it jumps from 2,814 to 3,516, and then to 2055, it goes up to about 4,645. So basically, we've done these projections based on the North Carolina Office of State Budget and Management. They're an arm that does basically projections of population, just like the U.S. Census Bureau does. So we've done it consistent with their formulas, as well as historic population growth in the town of Franklin. This is probably a little bit cumbersome, but the key points of what this is that you had a max peak day of about what's called 1.94. So you've got an average day's worth of water use, and your annual average days of slightly over 1 million gallons. Occasionally, you've got days that approach 2 million gallons, which is your capacity right now. Those are on your peak days. On your average peak is about 1.6 times that. So if you're about 1 million gallons, 1.6 million is your average peak. But you have had peak days that have approached the 2 million gallons capacity of your water treatment plant, or actually had at least one day that exceeded that in 2011. And those numbers, those peaking factors, that 1.94 or that 1.66 are pretty consistent with averages throughout the country. You can see things anywhere from 1.25 to approaching 3 for a peaking factor. And And that's important as we look at, okay, all right, how does the town need to grow, or how does the water plant need to grow, or is the town gonna grow, or is the water plant gonna grow? We were trying to equate that to other averages. The other thing that we were able to determine is that your gallons per day per capita, basically the average water use per person in the town of Franklin is 175 gallons per day per capita. And that's actually dead on the national average of 175 gallons per day per capita. So basically we did some, I'll call it truth test, to see if your numbers were consistent and that there wasn't anything too far out of line. And you're, I mean, middle of the pack, just like everybody else, you've got normal numbers basically. So what's that mean? I think this one gets into a little bit more in the next slide, puts it in paragraph form. But again, you've got an average usage of about 1 million, a max day about 1.8 million if you look across the bottom of this slide in 2010. 2015, the max day goes to about 1.9, and then when you get over 2020, it starts going above 2. So that's going to pose a problem for you all, since your capacity of your plant is only 2 million gallons. And you can see by the year 2055 that the max day approaches 3 actually. And the average day is slightly under 2. I think that's basically kind of hit everything on this slide again. You go to that 1.15 average in 2015 to a 1.91 million gallons per day max day in 2015, and then in 2020 your average day will be approximately 1.2 million, and your max day is going to approach slightly over 2 million. So based on this information, the last bullet is probably what you really need to focus on. We're recommending that the town needs to look into additional capacity for your plant, whether that be at the existing plant site or another plant site, or rehabilitating your existing plant or expanding it. We're recommending that you at least go to 3 MGD, which would basically hopefully take you through the year somewhere around 2055. One other thing we did too as part of the water master plan is we conducted what's called a water audit. And basically it's a measure of your water loss, and it basically compares you all to other systems in the country to see if you've got high water loss. And if you look across the bottom of this page, you'll see a UFW, that's unaccounted for water. In 2010, you had about 17 to 18% unaccounted for water, and in the year 2011, you had about 22% unaccounted for water. Those are pretty typical and pretty normal. The other thing we look at was called an ILI, which is compares apples to water systems, because people can measure water loss differently. And an ILI stands for infrastructure leakage index. And yours was rather low. It's basically below 3. The scale of an infrastructure leakage index goes from about 1 to 9, and lower is better. And since you guys were at or around a 3, you're actually measuring pretty good from the standpoint of water loss. And there's things that the town can do to continue to improve these numbers. For instance, when we first calculated this for the town, I think in 2010 you were about 20% unaccounted for water, and then in 2011 you were about 25%. But we were able to go back and through some information that Jay Gibson gave us, start to shave down those numbers. And there's a couple other avenues that are recommended in the report that town staff can continue to work on improving those numbers by basically just continuing to gather additional data. So really one of the big parts of the project was to figure out where you guys need to go, and that goes into the capital improvement plan. And at the end of the project, we basically looked at a number of options. We looked at rehabilitating your existing plant and expanding it to 3 million gallons, and that cost estimate was about $22 million, or $21,870,000. And then we looked at replacing your existing plant and expanding to 3 million gallons, and by that I meant basically just leaving what you have on site and not messing with it and just kind of mirroring it on the other, slightly over $22 million. And then we also looked at what the cost would be associated with rehabilitating the existing plant plus adding or doubling the capacity to 4 MG. And the cost of that is slightly over $26 million. We also just looked at various improvements for the water system itself. And you can see that we looked at maintenance improvements, Growth and expansion, that comes back to the water treatment plant, of course. We also looked at a couple other areas. We looked at, of course, you need to continue to maintain this report and your master plan and your hydraulic model that was associated with this report. In working with town staff, we forecast or put pricing on all the water line improvements throughout town. You can see here we've got these budgeted over the first 5 years as well as on the next slide after this. We've got 20 years actually. But some of the first improvements that we noticed or recognized, the first one was Gillespie Drive, replacing a 12-inch water line there. It's an existing 12-inch asbestos cement pipe, and we've recommended replacing that with ductile iron pipe. Green Street needs a water line replacement. Highlands Road needs a water line replacement. Sloan Street needs another one from Cane Creek Circle to the end of an existing 8-inch ductile iron pipe. And then you need some work on Grandview Court as well. And then there's a growth and expansion project. You need to basically put a new line in across East Main Street at Town Bridge. And this is a brief presentation of the 20-year capital improvement program. You can see we've also got some additional projects in here as well. We've got fire flow improvements, 2 projects, one on Old Cat Creek Road and one on Clyde Street, upgrading those lines in those areas to help improve fire flow throughout town. And then if you look down at the growth and expansion phase, we've also got you replacing the main water transmission main from the water treatment plant to downtown along Old Murphy Road. And then something that town staff wanted us to look at as well was you've got 3 main pressure zones that basically keep the pressure in town. And then you've got a number of smaller pressure zones that surround town, actually, for a lot of the communities up on the sides of the hillside, for lack of a better way to put it. Town staff wanted us to look at basically trying to make 1 main pressure zone, and which would help management of the system. You'd have less tanks, less pumping, be a little bit better situation for the town and maintenance. So we looked at that, and that came in at slightly over $3 million, and we've got that in year 5 through 10 of that 20-year CIP. Just went through most of those. So really, what's your next step, actually? Things that you need to do, or what we recommend you do, is conducting a meeting with the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources to discuss the available flow. And I always have trouble saying this. I think I get it after about a year, but Cartuguche Creek. Did I get it right?
Close
enough? All right. Right now, the available flow data from the creek says that you can withdraw up to 3.1 million gallons. So if you think back to some of the information I was telling you, we were looking at expanding possibly to 3, and we were also asked to take a look at going to 4. Well, theoretically right now, you can't go to 4 and pull it out of that creek. You'd have to relocate the plant, or at least study the creek to see if you can take more than that. You can. Right now, if we went to Diener today and asked for a permit to go further, you'd get one for up to 3.1 million gallons. I'm not saying that you can't go further, but you have to study the creek and figure out how much flow is in there. Their old historic numbers say that there's that much flow available for you. The problem with going and doing another flow study is we have had some drought conditions that could push that number down. Then again, we've had a lot of rainfall here lately that could maybe boost that number back up again. I don't know, but it's something that you could take a look at if you're serious about going to 4, for instance. What would take you to 4? That's another good question too. Right now, if you saw, we said that the max day in the year 2055 would just be slightly less than 3, and your average day was going to be slightly less than 2. So it really depends on how you guys want to manage growth, basically. And I think that's probably part of Derek's discussion with you all a little bit here as well. How far you're going to grow out into the county. Are you going to serve the county, or are you going to provide them with water, or are you going to limit what you do? And that's a decision that the mayor and the board here needs to make at some point here in the future. So, of course, another major aspect, you heard me say those numbers there of about $20 million, you're going to have to start raising rates to fund the improvements. And systematically to do so sooner rather than later. You saw those projections basically in a slide or two further down the line. we're projecting that on average, it's probably gonna take you 5 years to get to where you need to be from a construction standpoint. There's what's called an environmental assessment and preliminary engineering report that have to be done up front. And that's actually probably a little bit, in my mind, harder step than the actual designing of the plant and constructing of the plant. The environmental assessment typically is a long, drawn-out process with lots of public comment. Everything from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to the Army Corps of Engineers to everybody can talk about what they do and don't like with the project and forecast the needs. So that can be not a roadblock, but it is a time-consuming activity as you try and look towards improvement. So that's why I wanted to bring that up in front of you this evening to let you know it's not an overnight process, basically. Something that we've discussed with CAM staff is possibly going and sitting down with Macon County to discuss their water needs, if they want to be a partner or a part of any project the town wants to look to endeavor in at some point in the future. That goes back to having that debate about whether you're going to go to 3 or rehabilitate the existing plant and expand it, or expand all the way to 4. So you've got to make some decisions on that as well. I mentioned the environmental assessment and the preliminary engineering report, and then of course you've got to design your plans and specs and bid and construct your project. So from a schedule standpoint, I tried to put some of that together and show you where some of that could fall from a time frame perspective. Basically, from a 5-year perspective, you need to start now. So you need to start looking at raising rates. If you want to do that flow study, we recommend trying to do that sometime here in the near future, as well as the discussions with Macon County, and then to start endeavoring for that PER and EA process as well, so you can get into the design process and get into construction here in year 4 and 5. So with that, are there any questions that I can answer for the board?
Thank you. Do you have a water expansion 3 being done, 20, the one I'm looking at, 22.2, and then 4 being gallons, 26.1. I mean, the economies of scale make you think, why don't you go ahead and go to 4, because the percentage extra you're paying for the same amount of product is so small compared to the first million. But then you say 4 million, and you're not going to get 4 million out of Perfect J Creek, so then we're going to have to go somewhere else. But going somewhere else, you won't do that for 26 million.
No, it'd be more, and it's going to be longer than 5 years as well. You're basically, anytime you permit a new intake, you have to do what's called reclassify a river to classify it as a potable water source, basically. And so, of course, everything from your intake and upstream of your intake is classified for drinking water use, and you're allowed to do that. If you were to move, for instance, further downstream, you'd have to go through what's called that reclassification process to reclassify another section of the river, and that's on a good day, a 2 to 3 year process. They say you can do it in 18 months to 2 years. Every one I've done has been a lot longer than that. So,
Yeah, what would be the problem with starting that process now, whether we need it or not? I feel like, really, I think this improvement is good, but I think that with the growth of not only Franklin, but Macon County, we need to start. We've got 2 of the finest water sources in the United States, and we're not using them. Little Tennessee and Palisades. And there's a confluence there where you can trap out of either.
sure.
Would it be a real costly thing to begin those studies now where we have them in our pocket?
In the grand scheme of things, no. I mean, when we're looking at $20 million or $25 or $26 million, it's pennies on the dollar, but it's gonna, I mean, it costs money to reclassify. You're gonna have that PER environmental assessment plan to reclassify too. So you've got to have, we'll go back to that time frame or that schedule I showed you. Let's see. Maybe go over it. Won't really be able to start reclassifying the river until after about the first year, because, so, I guess the answer to your question is no.
Would there not be a lot of this study already done on those 2 rivers? Sometimes it seems like they did study the
It's not so much of a study as it is just that reclassification process. And what happens with environmental assessment, I'll get into some of their terminology, they look at what's called the secondary and cumulative impacts. And by that, I mean they look at, okay, if you're gonna be able to provide this much water, that means you're basically providing for growth. And they start getting into how you're gonna manage growth and the principles and practices of how the town will manage growth. So, it's not as simple as just saying, we want to stick a straw in there and do it. They basically start taking a hard look at the fact that how you want to do it. And then with reclassification too, for instance, let's say we go further downstream and you put a new intake in. It's going to put some development restrictions, everything upstream of the intake. You've got that already if you're upstream of your intake right now too. So they're not too cumbersome. I didn't bring those with me this evening, but that is it's typically something along the lines of about 2 houses per acre at the most, which probably isn't too inconsistent with what can be supported out in the community anyways, just from the standpoint if you get out into a rural area and have to put septic tanks in, you're not going to fit a ton of houses on an acre anyways.
So really, the recommendation is go 3 million where we're at.
At a minimum, yeah.
But when you get past that, then we have to go to another source.
Possibly. Again, we need to do a flow study first to determine that. So,
Well, but the flow study we heard was 4 million gallons. That's the number that we always heard. You take that according to projection. And you told us down to 3.1, so that's not trending, that's not a good trend line.
now, your intake.
We're approved for 3.1, aren't we already approved for 3.1?
You are approved for 3.1. One of the things we did do in the budget this year, we went ahead and budgeted the money to do the flow study on Carter River J. So that money's already in the budget to get this process started. And when Derek finishes with his presentation, we'll kind of wrap it all together. But I guess the main thing you want to get out of tonight is you hear what he's saying about the time frame that we're on, when we're going to be out of capacity where we're at. And you're hearing what it's going to take to permit another location somewhere. You may have to very seriously consider doing both of those at the same time. Rehab where you're at, get us up to capacity where we can produce long enough to get a source somewhere else if that's necessary when we look at it, and tie both of those projects together. And really tonight, the biggest thing you need to get out of tonight is the presentation of the information. Tie his presentation into Derek's information over a period of about 3 to 4 months. Get the flow study done this year that we've already budgeted for, and then that puts us on track to do some serious planning after the first of the year of 2014 to get a definite plan hammered out, so when we get into the budget process next year, you'll have a definite path on which we want to go so we can start this budget process. You've already started. We've already adjusted water rates a little. We got the flow study started. We've already looked at some issues on our bordering areas that Derek's going to talk about where we think demand's going to be and how much we can produce and whether we can produce enough for those areas or not. So basically tonight, take what he's given you and we'll hammer out some details over a period of a couple of months between now and the first of the year. And that's really when we need to get into a rock solid plan of this and come to terms.
Quick question. Did this take into account any necessary increase in wastewater treatment capacity, or?
That's another good question, because the sewer plant obviously is at a certain capacity, and you have to take that into consideration. We've just renovated it. You don't want to produce more stuff coming into the system than you can handle on the other end, or you're going to have more expense to tie on to this project cost that he's giving you. So that's something that's got to be considered when you go through this process.
The only fault I have with this study is I think your projections of population are real low. Really good. Because I think we've got a commodity that we can sell. That's what.
All right, we're gonna get Derek in here now. Derek, come on up.
Yeah.
Back row. Come on up, Brian, get back to the front row. Y'all gonna have to end up hanging.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just from the town standpoint, just real quickly, from a planning perspective, and speaking from the planning department, when you get a tool like this to use, and it's so helpful in your planning efforts, and when you have professionals like W.K. Dixon that have put time and effort into putting a document like this together, it's something we need to utilize, and it's something that can really assist us in all of our planning efforts. And in saying that, it kind of goes in correlation with documents that we have on file here in the town of Franklin and our principles of growth in the town of Franklin. If you read the principles of growth closely, the preamble states that the whole purpose of those 10 principles of growth are to ensure that Franklin remains a great place to live 20 years down the road. And furthermore, those principles of growth go on to tell us what a great place to live is, laid out in the principles. And those principles are things like directing development towards existing communities and preserving open space and making development decisions fair, predictable, and cost-effective. And those principles are intended to guide us as a town in all of our decisions that we make regarding land use in the future. And water, I was looking today on the internet, is perhaps one of the most precious resources that a town can have. And it's water sustains life. And if you don't believe how precious it is, you can just look an hour and a half down the road at the situation that's going on in Atlanta when they were told in 2010 that a city of over 500,000 people had less than 3 months of water supply left. And that's when it really gets real and it really strikes home. And again, the water model that W.K. Dixon has provided us looks at that population increase and notices the growth that could occur and recognizes that. And from the town's point of view, again, this is going to be an excellent planning document, and we would like to take this document and use it in our planning efforts. We'd like to take this document, sit down with the Water and Sewer Committee, and look at the growth that W.K. Dixon's projecting, but get a little better feel of areas in the county where the local knowledge from local people like the manager and the Water and Sewer Committee and myself, can really know where this growth, where we could potentially grow by sitting down and looking at our maps, working with GIS, working with the Macon County Tax Office, and all these resources that we have here locally, and try to get a better feel for that. So basically, this is going to really assist us as we look in, $26 million or $21 million. That's nothing to shake a stick at, and it's something that's going to require an extensive planning effort. And like I say, we're going to use this document and sit down with the Water and Sewer Committee and maybe hopefully come back to you next month with some suggestions that get born out of that committee and our discussions in regards to future planning efforts and the implications that this study will have on those.
Derek, I said too that if it's the time now that if it's going to, you have a lot of the growth's going to be out of the city limits. A lot of it.
Most all of it.
And so the county's going to have to be involved, and it's coming down to the point: are they willing to buy some of our water?
And if they're gonna,
I mean,
if they're gonna be involved financially, we can't be so pointing fingers exactly where they send it either. Because we're the de facto planning for the county. We're talking about where to send the water, even though we're the town. We have that ability to be the actual, the what?
We're in control right now.
That's right, that's right. And but of course, the county has to be a player with us, because most of the extra volume is gonna go.
And have water. I mean, it's going to come to that.
One of the things that you're gonna get from us too is a look at the vacant parcels. And basically you end up at the same result, but you take two different paths to come up with a number on what kind of a capacity you need in this plant. And by looking at the vacant parcels that you have inside the city limits and in the ETJ area, and basically base your usage on what the zoning currently is, what developed, which we know it's never going to be 100%. But if you pulled up an estimate and said, okay, we think over the next 20 years, 50% of them are going to develop, you can come up with a usage number that will apply for the city and the ETJ areas Then you look at your growth areas, which are usually gonna be your areas along your corridors where you already have infrastructure. You could do the same thing with those, even though those may be outside the ETJ or outside the city limits in the county. You can pretty well get a figure on what you think that usage is going to be if your infrastructure stays in the same place. And I agree, at that point, you'll know what you can produce, you know what it's gonna cost to go to 3 million gallons if that's what you wanna do. And then you have to make a decision as the board, do we want to invest X amount of dollars in this project to get to this point with the water? At some point, you're gonna have to invest some, you don't have a choice, you will have to invest some. It just depends on your revenue models after that. You know, are we gonna produce enough revenue off our rates, are we gonna adjust our rates to help pay for it? We're gonna look at the financial modeling of that to determine what we can pay for. Then you talk to those folks, for instance, we come to terms with all of this, and you'll be surprised, the numbers will probably be very close between what Derek will produce and what Brian will produce on the amount of water that you're gonna need. Then you come to terms and say, okay, well, we need this to do the city limits and the ETJ and these growth areas. You know, if we went to 3 million gallons, we could produce 500,000 gallons a day more. You know, we don't care where Macon County takes it, as long as they know that's all they can get out of this plant. If they want more than that, and they want to put water down a Halo, you know, if they want to buy the capacity, or somebody wants to buy the capacity, then that's fine. But we need to know that up front, because we don't want to get into this process and build this plant, and then 5 years down the road, somebody say, oh, you know, I need more water. Well, sorry, we don't have it.
Brian?
Yes, sir.
I don't want to belabor this too much. I know this is an executive summary, but I want to ask a couple of things. In your projections, where we're at right now, how many more years we have? You know, but it's an estimate.
I understand. Basically, I was saying that you have till about the year 2020, and then you're really up against the wall.
So we got 7 or 8 years.
Yes, sir.
Does the 7 or 8 years get us a plan on the total stage in Little Tennessee?
Hopefully.
And now, the actual facility that we have at Carpenter J, it's old but functional,
Yes, sir.
and it can continue to function beyond 7 years at the same or not.
It can, your plant, you guys have done some minor maintenance projects over the years there. I know you put a new intake in and you've done a couple other things out there, but it's in need of an upgrade. I mean, it's served you well for 40 or 45 years and.
But if you had 7 years and you could get a new one, and all of a sudden have 2 with 2 different sources,
Yes, sir.
whereas in short order, even if we had the 7 year, we're gonna end up having to come somewhere else to get above 3. You know, it's just things to think about. It's just things to think about. And it's all dollars and cents and future projections. But we appreciate the work of WK Dixon. I know you appreciate the check from Franklin, but it's a two-way street, and Derek, but it is certainly, I want the public to know that here at the town board, we are very aware of water and how it plays into the future of town of Franklin, Macon County, and where we live. And we're going to do our very best to make sure that we have the capacity when we need it. Anything else right now? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could we add one thing to the agenda for today? I understand there's a request from us to put Senator Bob Carpenter on the thing to maybe have his name put on 441, a section of his thing, and they're kind of wanting our vote, is that correct? Kind of wanting our opinion on it?
You know, Joyce, obviously the board speaks, we usually make the adjustments to the agenda.
I know, but we kind of jumped in and with Russell, and then I was like, but it's up to you.
Well, I mean, has any board member brought that to us, or how, in what fashion is that coming?
I thought it was going to be on the agenda.
Yeah, it had technically been put, I think it kind of came a little late, but it can be, yeah, the agenda had already been done, but to me, it's fine with me slipping in, but it's up to the board's discretion, of course.
I would have no objection to it. If the mayor,
Well, I'm
George, you want to put it?
I'll put it in motion that we put that on the agenda somewhere in between before we close tonight to,
Is it for an action item?
it is an action,
They're asking for a resolution.
a resolution.
Can it be something that we can get the resolution, look at it and address it at our August meeting possibly?
Yeah, I'd like to know why
Yeah,
what
I-
the reason,
I
what the
haven't
reason
even
we're
studied.
doing
I
it. I mean, it's gotta be
haven't-
something.
I've been out
Right.
of
I
town.
know why Merle Driving name was put in on hers. I would like to know why. I have no
Same time.
I mean, I guess,
objection to it.
is there a time issue? I mean, is there a time issue on something? Because it's not, I haven't seen any.
The phone call was made to me by Senator Davis was that there was urgency. If it were going to be done, they would first be done this month, but obviously you all had short notice to get it, so I'm sure they'd be understanding if you don't have proper time to address it. We have a resolution, we've got a standard resolution that could be done tonight if you so desire, but if you want more time to research it, obviously that's where we're at.
Well, you have a motion to
Yes.
modify the agenda to discuss that. Okay. All right, well, then I guess, certainly wouldn't, there's a motion, is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Opposed?
Yeah, this is-
Okay,
Me either.
we're not voting for it, are we? We're just voting to put it on the agenda.
Oh, it's a motion to amend the agenda, that's correct.
Put it
I
on, we're
guess-
not voting on doing it, we're just doing to put it on the
So,
agenda.
and then we could do that.
Do we, yeah, and we could, I guess if we have to do it, do we have something that anybody can,
We're not
I don't know what the
looking at it
procedure
now.
would
I mean,
be.
can we not
Do
put
you
it
have
on?
a piece of paper that we
That's
can read?
kind of what we were saying.
Maybe they can come, Senator Davis could come tell us why, what the reason behind it
Yeah,
is,
well,
we
I
have
would
something to
rather-
approve on, so.
I hate to vote on something I don't know anything about.
Well,
Yeah, that's fine.
Did I misunderstand the motion? I thought it was just to,
no, the motion was to put it on the agenda.
Put it on the
as an
agenda,
action.
but it already-
No, to vote.
Yeah, but it already sounds like it's not gonna go anyhow, so.
Well, it's not, it's a matter of not to go, I think the board is taking it
Well, I
back
mean,
by
to
the
see,
lack
yeah,
of
well, that's what I
notice.
mean, they're not, yeah.
Right.
It wouldn't go anyhow tonight, everybody's wanting to look at it, so.
well, I withdraw my second.
Nope.
And I would go my first. So there we are.
Moving on.
Set public hearing for rezoning petition by the town of Franklin for East Main Street, Gaston Street, Green Street, West Palmer. Land use administrator Derek Long. Where you at, Derek? Get back up there.
About every street down, ain't it?
Most of them.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, this is just a recommendation by the planning board to set a public hearing for this rezoning petition. And that, the time and date of the public hearing is included in your agenda packet. This, and also included in your agenda packet, I think at the very end is a map, which I apologize, I was looking on my tablet. We got it in electronic agenda packet this time, Farrell, but it just wasn't in color.
Okay.
And the only thing that the only adjustment that the planning board made with their recommendation to set that public hearing was to modify the section on Gaston Street and Green Street to bring it down a little bit from Harrison Avenue with that R2. Again, the R2 classification will enable manufactured housing to be placed on that property, and the planning board felt it would be best and would receive the least opposition and be most favorable to everybody if it was moved, that boundary was moved down from the, I said Harrison Avenue. That's correct, yeah. It's not, no, it's Trimont Trail, excuse me.
But it gets it far enough away from Harrison that
Yes,
nobody on
and
Harrison needs to
right.
have notice. It's not gonna affect them as nearly directly as.
And the recommendation of the planning board was,
To go ahead and schedule that public hearing with the modification that they made to the map.
motion for our August 5th meeting. It's like 7:05. Is there a motion to that effect?
So,
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. The next one is one that regarding Pauline Avenue. The recommendation of the planning board on that one.
Yes, recommendation for the planning board on that one is to go ahead and set. Again, the only thing with this one, it's something different than we encounter, and it has to do with the 16 residents that at the time of their application submission a third party submitted that application. And also included in your agenda packet, John has given us an affidavit for Mr. Brady that he will have to bring back to us prior to that public hearing that will certify that he has provided actual notice to each of the 16 applicants for whom he submitted an application on behalf of. And that'll certify that. If he can't provide us with that notice to the hearing, and John can speak a little bit more to this, if he can't certify to us that actual notice is provided, then the board cannot have the hearing on that day, but they can set the hearing for the following month, and his second option is to run it in the newspaper 3 times instead of the regular state required 2 consecutive weeks. He has to run it for 3 consecutive weeks if he's made an attempt through certified mail or personal delivery to deliver actual notice to those 16 applicants for whom he submitted it, but he can't do it. That's the remedy to that.
And again, the only thing I want to emphasize, and the reason that affidavit is included is just so you'll have an idea of what the kind of level of proof that we're talking about, that everybody who did not submit their own application for their property to be rezoned will have, been given really good notice, actual proper notice of the time and place to be here and give any thought.
So is this going to be a situation where we're going to set it for August, we're going to get a big crowd here, and then we get it here and it's not ready, we have to continue in September?
Well, we'll know because we'll have to be no more than 10, no less than 25 days before the hearing. He'll have to, if that actual notice is given to us in that time period, then we'll be able to know. But I mean, as far as that goes, John, he could technically bring it in the day of the hearing.
The way the statute reads, it just doesn't provide for a cutoff to say, well, it's 10 days before, so folks, never mind, we're not going to have notice to everybody. It's pretty much a make or break. Either show up and he's out. Now, maybe he'll have them all done.
Well, do we want to just,
Sure they're done.
do we want to go ahead and push it out 60 days? Now?
No, I think
You certainly could.
I mean, if there's going to be some idea, I don't want these folks to show up here.
I'm not saying you should, I'm saying you can't.
I don't want these folks to show up here and then have to just go home and.
I would think that the ones that are here tonight would make sure that the others have done that and to draw it on that. I just don't, that just doesn't,
And I've kind of set up the affidavit to sort of prefer personal service handed directly to the landowner. But it is satisfactory notice just to prove that he sent it by registered mail to any, and there's only, did we say maybe 3 out of state?
Yeah, 2 or 3. It's and with
2 or 3 that part.
that's out of state.
And those he'd be able to satisfy the notice requirement by showing a return receipt from the mail.
So 7/10 on August 5th, is that what we're saying? Is there a motion to that?
make a motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. And a public hearing for application to amend text only of UDO for regulating the location of electronic machines and sweepstakes.
This was the text amendment that was submitted by the town of Franklin to the planning board to amend chapter 152, section 28B of the UDO to include electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes. We have also incorporated a definition for electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes. It is defined as any device defined in North Carolina General Statute, Chapter 14, Section 306, for or any video game displayed on an electronic machine dependent on skill or dexterity of the player to reveal a prize. So what we have at this point is the inclusion of electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes in Chapter 152, Section 28B, the definition that I just read to you, and the planning board also discussed, and with that recommendation to set the public hearing, is further recommending that the private club setback restriction be incorporated into these electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes as well. In other words, aside from, hey, these are going to be permitted uses in the C3 highway commercial district, they also have to be 250 feet away from any residential use or 500 feet from another establishment that has electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes as well. So the planning board is putting all that in a recommendation and recommending that you hold a public hearing on that.
And the recommended time for the public hearing also will be August 5th.
Yes, at 7:15.
Motion.
Hope that ain't nobody's anniversary.
I make a motion.
I say.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Thank you, Gary.
Yes, sir.
Alcoholic Beverage Control Board appointment. Warren K.
Mr. Mayor, obviously with the presentation of Russell Bowen, you realize now that you have a vacancy on your ABC board. We did post the position, requested application, and we did receive one application, which is in your package. So that is being presented to you for your approval or further discussion.
All right.
Well, it was posted, it's been posted, and plenty of time. And I think probably if the individual took the time to fill it out, and he has an interest.
We
I
gave
would
everybody a
certainly-
chance.
Pardon?
We gave everybody a chance.
Yeah, they have a chance.
I make a motion that we accept Alton Sutton as
Alvin Sutton,
Alton Sutton Jr.
Norman Jack,
Yeah, better know.
good looking fellow. Jack?
Haven't heard it.
Oh, yeah.
Never heard the name Jack.
I haven't either.
I grew up with him.
Okay, there's a motion, and there's a second. Any further discussion?
Somebody.
I made a motion.
Sissy? Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Sissy, is that a, yeah, you made a second, so I guess that's a.
Shears.
All right.
Grandson,
Mhm.
right? Talking about.
That's right.
Yes. You asking, Vera?
It's probably a good
You'll find
story.
something.
We don't want to know the story.
I know that. He's down. Okay. Economic Development Commission appointment.
I just saw
One,
it.
obviously, Mr. Mayor, one other thing the board needs to consider is with you announcing that you're not going to renew your mayorship come November. You've been representing the town on the Economic Development Commission, Macon County Economic Development Commission. So one of the things the board needs to consider is for an appointment of someone to that position sometime tonight or in the future for the town.
I think the time, I think it's about time for a reappointment or a new appointment sometime in July, I believe.
When is, I was getting ready to ask, when is your term up for the appointment?
You know, don't hold me to it. What?
Out there's a list of all the terms,
Where's that, who's that?
2013.
Yeah, but you, see, I'm sure one.
So that would be at the end of your,
It seems like Tommy told me it was, they needed to know something in July, don't hold me to that. Meaning that the 2013 is up, not on the December 31st of 2013, but it's up, it's,
At the end of the calendar of the year for this county.
I'm not,
Maybe.
well,
I don't know,
I guess.
They had that out at the meeting last week.
What might be appropriate is if we had a consensus of the person, just whenever my term ends, to have someone that, hey,
Is this something we take applications for?
no, this is for,
Just us.
this
This is
is,
within the group.
this is within the group.
All of them.
It has to be for somebody from this group.
I'm a member at large appointed by the county. I made application to Macon County Commission and received an appointment to it about a year and a half ago. So my term expires 2015.
I could see if we delayed it until the term, expires.
Closer to the end.
Your term is up.
Well, I just see, Warren, we don't know for certain when it is.
I think there was some questions whether that was actually the fiscal year, which would be July 1st, or the physical year, which was the end. I don't know that there's a clear-cut answer as to when that term, other than 2013, expires. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
so, see, I guess we can,
I guess the way I see it. But if, and of course, Bob and I both agree with the mayor, let's leave this out, as in the mayor, but, I mean, I said, the mayor doesn't have to be me on that.
It's on.
No.
really,
Anyway, if we point somebody now, I mean, if we pointed, I think the new board's gonna be coming on. We have three seats up,
Mayor.
and I think,
that's right.
and so they're
Good
coming
possibilities.
on. And I feel like that new board should have the
So say so
opportunity
in
to,
the-
that would give us 2 representatives on the EDC.
Well, like I say, I don't know when, yeah. All right, well,
That's the
then,
only thing I said about it.
well, then I guess we're not in a position right now to do it, we need to talk to Shatley.
Because we don't know who's going to be here.
Well, one of the things I just want to caution the board, maybe you don't want to lose that representation, so make sure, we need to make sure we, whenever that term is, we've got somebody representing the town.
When can we find out for sure?
No, you won't.
How can we find out for sure?
But that would be-
How can we find out for sure?
Oh, we can, I mean, it's there, I just, it's just there, we just didn't ask.
Well, there was a change. I mean, Shatley's no longer head of the chairman. It was a vote last meeting that we had, and give me that back now,
Well, Farrell, are you on that board?
too. Yes.
Yes, he is on that board.
I have a problem pronouncing names. Johnny Merrick.
Oh, Mark Knippel. Knippel.
Is the new chairman. And David Hubbs is Mark West's job.
Well, clearly, we're not,
David Hubbs.
we're clearly not in position right now, I think, to go forward. If we hear from Warren, or we hear from them that we have to do something.
We do it next month.
Yeah, we'll look at it.
Need to find out what we need to do on this.
Okay. Old Town Hall property disposal. Warren?
I guess it's actually a year or so back, 2 years back, now you all as a board officially surplus the old town hall property, which is the other location. We have prepared a package, a webpage or a link on our webpage that will have pictures, photos, some information, ready to market that property. One of the options that you have in order to make that go hopefully easier and quicker, one of the options you have as a board, and my recommendation would be to send a letter to the Board of Realtors, not necessarily picking an individual realtor, but you can send a letter to the Board of Realtors and set up a procedure where any of the realtors in the area can come by and basically pick up the key and sign and say they're gonna go show the building to somebody. And if they follow through with it, and that person that they take actually follows through with the sale, and we sell the building, you as a board can offer them a, for instance, I don't know if commission is the correct term, but a finder's fee for common terms, for them for doing their efforts. Now, obviously, this is not a standard real estate transaction, so we will be handling a lot of the dirty work ourselves. But the suggestion I had was to set a fee for 3% for those folks, which if you all feel that's fair, either low or high, then we can certainly adjust that. But also understand that this will still go through the same process as any other purchase that folks will make from you, that the realtor will take them out, that those folks will make an offer to us, which then the board will have to accept the offer at an official meeting, just as you are tonight. Then you'll have the 10-day upset, and somebody else can come in and upset the bid. So,
Yeah, that's-
so you don't have to take any bids. You don't have to take the first one that comes. And then even if you do accept it, that may still not be the end of it if somebody else says. We've got an appraisal back, so I have the documentation for you, a current appraisal telling you what they think fair market value is, so you'll have some reference to go off of.
And I'll also just point, just the only thing I would add to that is that the end of that bid process, if it's still not a satisfactory number to this board, you're not bound to accept it.
We would be bound if we put a number out there and somebody accepted. If it was upset.
And it was not upset. Yes, sir. If you proposed a number and it got met, I still don't think you're technically legally bound to sell to them until you accept that final number. I don't know if you can really make an offer to sell, you gotta make an offer to buy it.
So essentially what I'm asking for is the okay from you all to present that letter to the board of realtors with that percentage in there that kind of just says we'll be open to negotiation, obviously with you all, if you feel like that's significant or not enough, whatever you feel.
What I can tell you as a real estate attorney, most of them are 7%, and a lot of them are split. So 3.5 might be the number that they're just used to, because that's what they usually end up.
Aren't some of them at 10?
That it would be because it's commercial. That's true. So
I'm trying to save you a little. It's up to you what you want to do.
Yeah, he's trying to save his money, let's go with him.
3.5.
Do we need a motion on that?
Well, we do, but we need to go ahead and put a percentage that we're on.
And you are correct, the commercial percentage is 10.
So we
But 3.5, I think is
3.5.
fair.
Easily determinable.
I make a motion, we just, go ahead, say 3.5% commission, send it to board of realtors.
There's a motion.
I second it.
Second, got any discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Good, moving forward on that. Okay, let's go to 5A first. Ordinance to repeal chapter 112, the amusement ordinance. Amusement, that's a good way.
Amusements are, and I will, amusements are any games of skill that somebody might host for, as a business. Mr. Mayor, I went and looked at chapter 112 and we discussed just the pool table aspect of that. And I cannot see any way to amend that thing and not just make it incomprehensible Swiss cheese. So my recommendation to you, I also spoke it over with Chief Adams, and he didn't think any of the aspects that were in place with that were really necessary for him or for our force to adequately police places that have the various amusements that are regulated in it. So my recommendation to you is to adopt this ordinance and just repeal chapter 112 altogether. The board will retain the ability, if we determine sometime later that amusements are in need of regulation, to come back and do that. But that's my recommendation to you now.
I make a motion, we repeal chapter 112.
And adopt the ordinance.
Yes.
I second.
There's a motion and a second. Plenty of time for discussion.
Well, I want to discuss it a little bit, because several years ago, when the folks in Franklin had a chance to vote on whether we was going to be able to serve alcohol, it was voted on for Class A restaurants and motels. And it said nothing about private clubs and all the other little loopholes on the ballot that they marked. And I think it's kind of unfair to keep repealing ordinances that make a way for the expansion of alcohol. Now, private clubs are springing up, too many, as far as I'm concerned. One is too many, as far as I'm concerned. But I just think that the people didn't vote to expand this alcohol out into the county, and we kind of adopted a policy that we were not going to annex any other property if the sole purpose of that annexation was so that they could serve alcohol or sell alcoholic beverages. So, with that said, if the pool table blocks it, for me, that's fine. I just keep the pool tables.
Further discussion?
We are talking about serving beer in the pool hall, or having pool tables,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which has been going on here for years.
Yeah, it's been happening anyhow.
Yeah, and it's basically in private clubs where
Yeah.
you don't have to go in. If you're not a member or a guest, you're not allowed to go in, so it's not open to the general public.
Which establishments are we, is this affecting?
It would be affecting the bowling alley, I guess. The one on next to Domino's, Mixers. And then there's one on the Highlands Road that's wanting to open up. correct?
Dugout.
The dugout, yeah.
And these are not public, so anybody can't walk into them.
They're all
They're
private.
private.
The bowling alley already has it, doesn't
But it's public, it's not private, bowling alleys.
Oh, of course not. I don't know, somebody might can tell me how all that
Yeah, I
fits
don't
in.
understand.
it? I have,
Well, the ability to have a private club is a feature of state ABC. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether in our local referendum to allow the sales in Class A hotels, motels, and restaurants. If the ABC Commission will give you a permit to have a private club, then you can do it. There's no local regulation that can change that.
Then there's no regulation, then why are we looking at this?
Yeah.
There's no local regulation to say whether or not you can have a private club. What we're looking at is whether or not,
Like poker.
whether or not the owner of an establishment that sells alcohol can also have amusements, and that's
Be it
pool,
public or private.
operating a bowling alley. There's a number of things that are amusements under that chapter 112.
It could be darts, it could be,
All we're repealing is the 1948 ordinance that was set in effect, says that you can't serve alcohol, or you can't have food tables, but you serve
I,
alcohol.
but you bowl.
As a aficionado,
Bob's got the floor.
Food shark.
as an aficionado of a misspent youth in pool halls, I think that the ordinance is one of those old ordinances, kind of like you can't hitch a horse to a parking meter. And I just feel like that, things have changed since 1948, which is when I understand this ordinance was passed. And come on, folks, let's face it, our demographics are changing too. People are coming here for the type of amusements where alcohol is served. And I would not be against repealing this whatsoever.
Further discussion? We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Okay. Let's move down to some announcements. Yeah. Application for fiscal year 2013-2014 nonprofit funding pool. Those applications are available at Town Hall and also at our web online at www.franklinnc.com. And what is the deadline that we have on that?
August 26th.
August 26th. So I wish the newspapers would really put in an article that nonprofit funding pool applications available need to be in by the 26th of August. And we have a luncheon for the town of the Franklin employees, Wednesday, July 3rd, high noon, Fat Buddies. And we have a joint meeting. It's our turn to host our joint meeting with Macon County and the town of Highland. We've set the date at July 30th, which is a day of the week.
Tuesday. It's a
Tuesday.
day of the week, okay.
Tuesday.
It's a day of the week, that's good.
At the location yet to be finally determined, but will be in plenty of time for everybody to know. We do have a closed session under NCGS 143-318.1, 11A6 that we're going to need to take care of. That will be, won't be coming back in and taking any action. And we won't be really otherwise doing any more further business of the board tonight, I don't think. Tell me if I'm wrong. But that said, before we,
There may be
might.
Yeah, we'll have to.
We probably will.
We'll have to
Okay.
take action.
All right, yeah, yes, we will. All right, well then, before we go into closed session, is there any other business before the board? Is there a motion that we go into closed session?
I suppose.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, so we're adjourned upstairs to the conference room. Go back into open session.
So moved.
Second. Harold, second. All in favor, raise your hands. Any further business for the board?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to adopt the resolution that we're
To what?
talking about.
That's the resolution which has been submitted, be available to them. There's a motion, there's a second.
A second?
Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? With the business, motion we adjourn.
I make a motion to go home.
Get us out of here, John.
Unanimous.
Unanimous, sir.
All right. Move around.